Great. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and David already sort of gave the starting point for this. In 2000, actually, as we entered the new millennium, I participated actually it was the beginning of leadership, Center for Houston's Future, and they had a bunch of leaders together, and there were some scenarios. And one of the scenarios was, in fact, dealing with quality of life. And it was actually write a paper, or put together, and we joined that, I kind of rewrote it, okay, from sort of a group process of basically dealing with a vision for a livable city. As you know, in scenario work, you're really trying to envision a future which hasn't happened, and you're trying to sort of put together and imagine sort of what that will be. And so the whole concept here was to really, that we faced as a city was, you have huge changes in technology and global competition. In this city, quality of life is hugely important in terms of attracting the talent that this city needs to in order to prosper in the future. And so the vision really was one of becoming a region of city centers, okay, that are livable, but they're joined by corridors, both public and private, that delight the human, that delight the eye, okay? And so that, that was sort of the gist of where we were going. What's been interesting is sort of what's happened since. Now, for those of you that are, is everybody from the Houston region here, right? Yes? Okay. At that time, already we had a number of dense employment centers, as David just showed in his presentation. This slide here is actually from over 30 years ago, okay, as we were beginning to have offices move away from downtown and central part of the city. And you've seen this slide, so you're now familiar with these dots, and obviously downtown being the big orange there. But the evolution of these blue dots, which are substantial work locations within the region, they have grown remarkably. And so starting with Uptown, which in any right would be a major downtown in any city in America. It has different characteristics than a traditional downtown per se, but it functions very much like one. But then there's the Woodland Town Center that has grown remarkably since 2000. I was surprised as I really went back and looked at what the last 15 years has meant. Sugarland Town Square, a little less to be the case, but then as you know, there's plenty of other centers beyond that. Meanwhile, downtown itself had a lot going on, and this was everything in development around 2000. I just found this whole slide and put it in. And at that time, the ballpark was just really sort of getting going. We, at the same time, were working with Mayor Brown and also with the medical center and the rodeo and the museums and whatever to begin to realize we had a tremendous thing going in the Main Street corridor. This was pre-rail. And so our thought does this corridor really create the super core of the city? And then at the time, we even began to kind of say, working with Urban Land Institute, should we come up with some way to begin to develop a far more walkable urbanism in that corridor and beginning to actually deal with the regulatory regime at the time. This is just a slide that came from that era that just gives all the goodies that existed in the corridor at that point in time. Now, if you drop back a little bit, and David was showing, we had those sort of areas, those concentric circles around those activity centers. This is the scatter of where downtown employees work. It's a heat map, so you can get some sense of what it's all about. Our transit system, our park and ride system, is actually illustrated in blue on that. And for that reason, downtown has always performed totally differently than most of the rest of the city in terms of the number of people who use transit. And so as you can see here, we have almost 26% of the people using park and ride, and a little over half that do something other than drive their own vehicle. In fact, when we surveyed, it's very economy sensitive, and there's a lot of other conditions that play into it. When we did the very same survey, this was over 13,000 downtown employees. We were actually under 50% that were driving alone to work. It switched a little bit between 2009 and 2013. If we did it again, it may change. I put this in because this is in some ways the vision that I had as we did this of sort of what we would have. We have a central core with Uptown and Downtown and the Medical Center. We would connect it with Park and Ride or some service linking all the nodes that we've been talking about here, where we do have higher density of both employment and population now, that we would link those nodes by some other kind of circulator transit such that each has its own transit system, and you're beginning to see that come about in a way. We in downtown have a little green link, and of course we have plenty of transit service and rail to boot. And then you add on top of that the crosstown routes as well, because what was happening, not as much in the past, but certainly more and more, you had to be able to get from one node to another, not just to downtown. Hard for me to say that, but anyway, you know, it's what it is. And then if you connect to either commuter rail or high-speed rail or whatever, obviously you have to connect to the network somehow to make it work. Remarkably, in 2003, when voters approved a plan for Metro for its rail, it actually is the map on the upper left there, right. Oh, there it is. That's it. Okay, it's this map. It actually does. It is that core that I had in that slide, and now with rail up and operating. But Christoph, you'll tell more about this, right? You're not going to. Okay, well anyway, the guy in the back of the room is going to speak to you, gets a heck of a lot of credit for leading the charge on this. But Metro's new, reimagined, but its new bus network, as it's now called, really in many ways does exactly what we were talking about in those very crude diagrams in terms of beginning to really connect the nodes within the region. Kudos to Metro for putting it up. Now let me drop back a little bit, because we talk about getting around, but part of that is that once you're in the environment of downtown, it's really sort of how does that walkable urbanism feel? And downtown really had almost no investment in its infrastructure for a period easily from the 50s maybe all the way up into the 90s. So that you ended up with really a horrible public realm in which to really conduct business, and more, worse than that, visit or live. And what happened is that several different projects over time helped to rebuild that infrastructure, starting with a massive project, which was initially money intended to pay for a monorail kind of connector system that ended up under the Lanier administration being used for building actually transit streets, which have been actually very helpful to both downtown and midtown in terms of reconstruction of facilities. From our perspective, it gave us a chance to go back and deal with lighting, shade, sort of the pedestrian amenities upon those streets. You may not see it here real clearly, but there's a little bitty stick tree here, and there's another one down here. Those little bitty stick trees have grown up already a lot, because we have a huge irrigation system under downtown that waters all those trees, and they've grown very, very quickly over time. There are other places, I might just say, where we don't have trees in downtown, like up and down here on McKinney Street, and I can say one of the reasons, and everybody keeps saying, why don't you plant trees? The city, in its infinite wisdom, has always let developers have basement vaults which go out almost under the street. So the reality is it costs tens of thousands of dollars to put trees in, because you're putting them in the top of their basements. And so you literally have to rebuild basements, and in some cases, if you've got garages, it just doesn't work. So we've had to come up with other strategies like little planters and things like that, sort of skinny, to make it all work. I mean, the details we won't have time for here, but anyway, as we looked at Main Street was going to be a transit street. It was a light rail under the Brown administration. The decision was made to build the Red Line and the starter line for Houston, and we said let's kick it up a notch in terms of what we did with the street. And so these are drawings with the brick streets that are there today and Main Street Square, which you're familiar with. And I love just showing the pictures because they're fun to look at. They always make me feel very good when you see it. At the same time, we were actually working with the city to do Cotswold project, which we did over 90 blocks in the north end of downtown. And the main thing that it did was actually put head-in parking in it, narrowed the streets, created a much, much more pleasant pedestrian environment. We did it as the city did it as an economic development move. They paid for a great deal of it off the additional parking revenue from the over 1,000 spaces added as we went to diagonal parking. But let me say it took many years to sort of catch up, but it's catching now. This was a great investment. It's just the payout came much later than anybody ever really thought. At the end of the day, We've ended up with well over 80% of the streets in downtown redone in one project or another. I know that may be hard to see, but all the yellow on the map here are the transit streets. The green is the Cotswold up in here, and then there's various other projects in addition to that that have been redone over time. This was very important in really beginning to change the pedestrian realm and really create walkable urbanism within the downtown area. You know, it's kind of funny, but along the way we've become experts in this urban environment. And it's cleaning it, and it's taking care of it, and it's making people feel safe in it. It's a lot more than just the design or the landscaping or that part. And there's also a great deal of programming that takes place, and I'll talk a little more about that. At the same time, we actually have to deal with things like working with homelessness. Downtown, uniquely almost compared to most of the other centers in the region, has always been a place where there are many homeless people. And so I'm very proud to say at this point, again, I won't go into great details, but under a unified effort here, we're leading the nation right now in terms of beginning to house homelessness. We will end chronic homelessness in Houston, Texas next spring. We have already ended veterans' homelessness in Houston, Texas. It's been recognized. We had 3 cabinet secretaries in June to announce that. And so, but I can tell you every day it's still hard. It's a great deal of work to keep working with it, because we're talking about veterans and chronics, the most compromised of the homeless. There are other people who are homeless that are still there, and we're still working on this to make it work better. I thought I would take a moment, sort of having kind of set up saying, you know, we've learned about how public space and the streets work. We've, I think, over time begun to kind of notch it up a little bit. And so David showed the pictures of Central Park, but the idea of creating a major urban park in downtown in front of the George R. Brown, and you can see some pictures here of that. Oops, I went real quickly to a bunch of slides. But this is the area that George R. Brown is here. This was pre-George R. Brown Convention Center. This is opening day at the George R. Brown Convention Center or thereabouts. And so the idea was to transform what used to be called Houston Center Gardens and a couple parking lots into something bigger, an urban park. What was very critical about this compared to most other parks that the city had built up until then was a lot of work went into programming the park to decide what it was to be before anybody touched the paper for design of the park. And so this is actually not a design at all. This is really the results of public programming of what people wanted to do in this urban park if we built one. And so that translated to design, and voila, with a lot of pain and money and effort, it turned into a park which consistently after the first year now has over 1 million visitors a year. That is a normal day at Discovery Green. Simultaneously, well, let me just say that sort of piling off of that, we're really making a pitch right now to increase our convention enterprise in the city, and therefore there is construction now actually on changes to the George R. Brown to put a better front door, and also to at the same time, we actually extend the public space actually in what was Avenidas de los Americas. Across downtown, Old Market Square was pretty down the tube, very underutilized, really didn't work well, sort of park designed by artists. Same process, programming, carried into design, carried into a park that has tremendous activity. We don't keep records on how many people come here, we operate it. The reason is when we do an event, we don't try not to publicize it too much because we only want about 300 or 400 people to come because that's all the park can handle. It feels great. It's a great secret, so yeah, we welcome you if you come. Okay, it's great. Okay, but it is Houston, Texas, and if you do a lot of publicity, you can get a very big crowd very quickly in Houston, Texas. Believe you me. You know, these parks, I think, kind of are part of now began to create really truly the walkable urbanism package. And as we've looked at getting around, the thing that's really kind of perplexed us is this issue of there's such high demand, a high amount of single occupancy vehicle drivers that are short trips, including me, okay, that we really aren't serving real well with transit. I think with the new network we may do a little better, and with the rail expansion opening we'll do better. But in many ways, what we're really trying to do is get as many people over into that walk-bike category as we possibly can, that light blue. And so one of the things that has been huge in that was beginning to change the economics for developing residential within the downtown. And therefore, the Downtown Living Initiative was initiated about 3 years ago. It's been outrageously successful in attracting developer attention. What was critical about it is that there is a set of design guidelines related to the street level space of the building, the street level facades and the uses of the building, such that we are trying to create what's behind the sidewalk, the pedestrian environment that people all believe they should have in a major urban city. Houston struggled with that. Developers have sort of callously said, I can't do it, I'll just put a blank wall in. And this whole project's geared around really beginning to change that for the public sector rebating part of their incremental property taxes back. We've had tremendous success. Today there are, including a couple projects that were actually not in the program, there are 11 projects under construction. There's 2 more ready to go. There's over 3,200 units under construction at this point. As I recall, there's 7 more projects that are still sort of out there in the development pipeline to go. When we're done, that will increase the amount of housing in downtown by almost 140, 150%, which is a big jump and much needed. These are under construction. These are in the pipeline. As you can see, they're pretty hefty projects. We were actually surprised at the density of the projects. And that sort of fits with what we know is beginning to happen in the workplace, and that is people want to be able to walk to work. Work is mingling with public space and new, innovative, shared space for startup companies and for small businesses. It very much fits a millennial generation. And so, all of this to us is sort of this convergence coming at the same point in time. I would say, quite frankly, I think our office market has not quite figured that out, but I believe it's coming. I think actually the economic downturn is going to help drive that. It's very easy to sign very large energy company leases and you're all happy, but when it's not a good leasing environment for that, I think that may breed some more innovation in terms of the way we look at office spaces within buildings. We've started to look at downtown as sort of a heat map of where at street level you have sort of jobs, residential, and whatever. I won't spend a lot of time. This is Market Square. Here's sort of Main Street Square here, Discovery Green. It probably ought to be darker in color here up near the ballpark in Union Station. But these new neighborhoods, and for the first time ever showing up in the south end of downtown, 2 years ago we would have had no shading in that area. And it's really sort of driven by the experience we've had at Market Square, which has been the greatest economic development tool we've ever had. We now have tremendous life back in the historic district. If you haven't been down there, take a look at it and you will see. And we have 2 high-rise towers under construction, which will again more than double the population of that area. Christoph lives there, so I want to be careful. You've got a lot of neighbors coming, Christoph, at this point to change it. The other area, and really in some ways that area really works very well, and the park is sort of heart of the community. Okay, it was designed as a neighborhood park. Now the other area is our shopping district up where Foley's Macy's used to be. That is more challenging, and we're back reworking that at this point. There is development going on in the area. In this slide, which is confusing, this is Main Street going north, and this is Dallas Street, Discovery Green's right here. But we're very excited. We have a request for developer proposals. We're working right now for the old Sockowitz property, which is in green. And then the building, this is the new office building here, and this is the new hotel right there. Oops, one more time, advance. Continue to advance, let me back up. One of the things we're doing is actually going back and retrofitting work done fairly recently at Main Street Square to make it feel better as a shopping district. Same is true with Dallas, which don't go down there right now. You'll cuss at me, it's in bad shape, it's pretty torn up. But our goal here is to really come back with a shopping district. But at the same time, we're programming it to make it far more livable place where we really have control of the public environment. It includes public art of various forms and natures. It includes food. It includes just sort of constant programming of it, so we treat it very much the way Discovery Green works, very much the way Market Square works. This one's we're working on right now hard, and we'll be working very hard in the next year or two. And once we do it, we own it forever. We're not stopping once we do it. So again, a lot of development at the same time. But there's been development in other areas too. The downtown's right at the center. That's a 3-mile circle around downtown, 15 years of tremendous residential development going on around downtown. And I would tell you that that circle you saw is the yellow one. Look at the red one here. That area, that's really uptown, downtown, Texas Medical Center. That triangle to me is really kind of the core of the core of the city. It's almost more than downtown now when you really look at it from a regional perspective of what's happening. The numbers I'm looking at are how many people live and work in the same space, and those percentages are low. If you look at Philly and others, those numbers will be way up in the 30s and 40% numbers, and that's something we're kind of carving away at. The management districts play a role in that. The tax increment reinvestment zones play a role. Our paper from 2000 talked about new funding mechanisms, and I would say the most potent have been these tools in causing this stuff to happen. And as you look around, you see it. This is up at Kirby. This is over on Washington Corridor. This is in the East End. This is Edo, East Downtown, just on the other side of George R. Brown. That's the soccer stadium. This is Midtown, which is tremendous in terms of what's happening. So I think these tools are beginning to create a dense, livable core far beyond just the middle of downtown. And we know it's a young population. The bright blue bars here are young people, all living very close to downtown. And so we know it's coming. And we know what those young people really want. They want multimode, they want a lot happening, they demand sustainability, they demand a healthy lifestyle, and parks play a big piece into this and connecting all, one more time, another connection system for the region, especially with the desire here to have a regional bikeway system using the bayou. I want to sort of finish here on a couple of thoughts. One is Buffalo Bayou. Work started in earnest in '85 to change it, and this is what it looks like today in the theater district. And there's been continual improvement made along the bayou. And of course, just recently, if you haven't visited it, you should. Before you leave here today, go by Buffalo Bayou Park, which is 160 acres running to the west of downtown. What I'm excited about in Buffalo Bayou Park is it doesn't look like Market Square and it doesn't look like Discovery Green. They don't mow the grass. And I think that is a huge thing because I run here all the time. There's a mowed strip on each side of the walk. Oops, I hit the wrong button again. But that mowed strip is all it is, and the rest of it is sort of left to go to nature, okay? And as somebody who's used it for years, I think it's going to feel fantastic in the years ahead. I'm on the oversight committee for this because the Redevelopment Authority, which we run, writes a very large check to maintain it. So we're in the middle of this, okay? And there literally are designated areas of how you maintain it. But the whole idea of this is a bunch of this stuff is not going to have grass cut in terms of making it work. And it also is meant to adapt to when we have floods and we do have rain that comes through. Looking forward, I think kind of the big vision here is connecting Buffalo Bayou Park, here's downtown, Buffalo Bayou Park, somehow to Memorial Park, and then the work that Uptown's doing now with its transit way to begin to kind of have a park, sort of a connection back in so that you really have park to park, or uptown to downtown in one seamless connection. The other final thought I'll leave you with is even more compelling is once we get to begin to rework our freeways, which we are doing with TxDOT for the core, we have the opportunity to make pieces go away, like the Pierce elevator, put a roof on this section, have all of this below grade through here on I-69, US 59. Really tremendous opportunities to begin to actually sort of re-stitch the city together in terms of the walkable neighborhoods that are adjacent to the neighborhoods within downtown. And so we're working hard on this. It'll take time, it'll take money to fund it all. But when you start to look at the urban and the green opportunities associated with this, this is mind-boggling. It'll keep you laying awake at night to thinking about what all the opportunities are. Imagine connecting Buffalo Bayou somehow back up to the George R. Brown and the Convention District. I do think that possibility might be there. Imagine what it'd be like, however we want to treat what happens to the land that's under the Pierce Elevated. You know, I think it has just come. In the paper in 2000, and to finish, we said, you know, we wanted to tell the world about how Houston's changing, because it is changing. It's changing for the better. And so I think here the key on this is we thought back then that we were chasing after the 2012 Olympic Games. And we said, this is the great time to put our region on to sell the region. And so we didn't get to the Olympics, obviously, but I think what is neat is being able to showcase our city with a Final Four next year, and then with the Super Bowl in 2017. So we still get that chance for showcasing the progress. So that's it. And we might hold the questions. I want to let Christoph go ahead and get into it if we got a firm stop on our 4 o'clock, right? I think.
Sort.
You got one?
Yeah.
Will it change?